is Gininda really the one that's doing all the cooking on his own, or is the NPA part of it?
And I'm bad like the Barbie. I'm a doll, but I still wanna party. Things felt like I'm ready to bend. I'm a 10, so I pull an next 10. Like Gabby, Stacy, all of the Barbies is pretty. Damn, all of the Barbies is bad.
Hello and welcome to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Nogwazi Ntombela, also known as Gwazi Bear on all social media platforms. Do subscribe, be a part of this family, and if you are a returning subscriber, welcome back, darling. Now, as you know, every week I bring you an update on what's happening in the Senzo Meyiwa trial, and I'm here to do exactly that. Before I get into this video, please like this video and engage with me in the comment section down below. This will help my video reach a greater audience, therefore inviting new subscribers to my channel. Let's get right into the proceedings for the week. On Tuesday, the 26th of November, Advocate Mnisi, defense for accused number 3, continued with his cross-examination of Gininda, the lead investigating officer in this case. And some of the questions that he touched on were based on the arrest of accused number 2, Ubongani Ndanzi, and just questioning how the lawyer got to know that Ndanzi was arrested, because Ndanzi had indicated that he had not received a call. Now, some of the interesting facts that Mnisi touched on are the fact that Ndanzi had not received a call at the police station. There's no indication of such call in the OB books, yet Mjiyako was able to reach Ndanzi and was said to be his lawyer. Gininda then answers and says that there are some calls that were recorded on Ndanzi's phone, the one that they allege was found in his possession when he was in prison. And Mjiyako did receive a "please call me" or something to that effect, which insinuated that Ndanzi was in communication with Mjiyako with his cell phone that was never confiscated. Another thing that Mnisi touched on is the number of Mjiyako that was said to have had communication with Ndanzi's number during that period, and he questions how did they know that that number belonged to Mjiyako, and who confirmed that number. Baloyi then stands and says that Pinky Vaithalingham confirmed this number, which is not accurate, because what the state did is made Pinky read the LPC letter, and this was not a record from Vodacom. So Pinky did not confirm that that number belongs to Vodacom, but they made her read a letter that they alleged came from the LPC. Mnisi then points out that they have never received a letter of appointment for Mjiyako confirming that Mjiyako was indeed a representative from Ndanzi. Baloyi then objects to this, saying that they have no obligation to provide this, and he says that there is a client-attorney privilege that they don't want to venture into. Then Mnisi says, well, the only difference here is that Ndanzi is denying that this person was indeed his attorney, and in the case of Ramusipili and Titi Tobane, because they made an example of that, that wasn't the case. Ndanzi did not deny that these people were his attorneys. Another interesting aspect that Advocate Mnisi touches on is the issue of the witnesses that were in the house and the statements that they produced. Now he asked Gininda, having read the statements, were you satisfied that they were indeed intruders? And Gininda's response is, yeah, he was satisfied that they were intruders. However, some of the statements the witnesses in the house needed to write over and over again, and they had lots of corrections and lots of contradictions in their statements. Then Mnisi touches on the issue of the ID kit and why some of the witnesses that were in the house were not approached to actually go and identify the alleged intruders when all 5 of the accused were arrested. Now, the reason that Gininda gives as to why these people were not approached, he says that he was only told to approach Dumelo and Mtoko, which are Senzo Meyiwa's friends, and the reason for that is because this investigation was led by the prosecutors, and they advised him not to extend the invite to the other witnesses that were in the house. Now, Mnisi goes on to basically go step by step as to the reasons as to why these people didn't go to an ID parade. So he starts with Utumelo Madlala, where he says, okay, so you did approach Utumelo because the prosecutors led you to do that. And what was his response when it came to the ID parade? And he says that Utumelo was 50-50 about doing an ID parade because he was uncertain that he'd be able to point out the intruders. When it comes to Mtogo, Mtogo said he wouldn't be able to identify the intruders, so he was unable to do the ID parade. He says that the reason why Longwe Twala was excluded was because of the pictures that were found on his phone that were matching pictures that were found on Kelly Kumalo as well as accused number three's phone, which is interesting because down the week somewhere, he then says that Longwe also identified the wrong suspects in one of the other ID parades. Now, I found it very funny that also with Zandi Kumalo, when he's questioned why Zandi Kumalo was not taken to an ID parade to be able to identify the suspects, he says that with Zandi, there was a bit of suspicion that was raised due to the SMSs that her sister had sent to her, or the communication between her and her sister in the previous years before Senzo's death. Another interesting thing that we learned on Tuesday is that when Makumalo was approached, she came in the presence of an attorney. When they go into detail about Makumalo's statement, Nisi then points out that in essence, Gininda, when reading the statement of Makumalo, who talks about the dreadlocks, Gininda didn't bother asking about the length of the dreadlocks, the color of the dreadlocks, the height of the person, the voice in which the person spoke, and the tone in which the person spoke in. And Nisi basically said, did you actually investigate anything here? Now, the state objects to this to say that Gininda didn't have notes, so that he can't be expected to answer all these questions that Umnisi is posing to him with regards to what questions he asked Umakumalo. Baloyi also points out that the questions are irrelevant. Umnisi's response, he says that the questions are very relevant because the state had said that they are keeping Gininda for last. They're keeping the best for last. And now that Gininda is here, he's unable to answer the questions, which he should be able to answer as the lead investigating officer of this case. And they had also indicated that Gininda would be the last person so that he could sum up everything about this case. To complete the cross-examination on Tuesday, Gininda basically says that he was satisfied that accused number 3 was the alleged suspect that came into the Kumalo household based on firstly, the dreadlocks that he had, and the people in the house confirmed that he had dreadlocks. And another thing he says was the firearm and other corroborating statements. Those were the proceedings on Tuesday, and on Wednesday, Mnisi continued with his cross-examination and now touching on Longwe Twala's statement. Now, there was a few things that were very interesting about Longwe Twala's statement. The first one being that he also says the person or the first intruder that entered the house was dark in complexion, which is consistent with what Makumalo also told the policeman. Now, guys, I will keep emphasizing the fact that accused number 3 is not dark in complexion, but all the witnesses seem to say the suspect that entered the house was dark in complexion. Now, when he continues to go into the details of Longwe's statement, another thing that is contradictory in this statement is the fact that he says that the second intruder was light in complexion, referring to accused number 2. And Ntanzi is definitely not light in complexion. Now, as we go on into Longwe's statement, all along we've been told that Longwe basically ran out of the house before the scuffle even happened, before anything really happened. So the guys literally walked into the house and Longwe was out, according to all the witnesses that have testified in court. However, according to Longwe's statement, he saw the scuffle and only ran out the house after the first shot was fired. This was very interesting to hear. Now, what I found very interesting on Wednesday is the fact that when Gininda is asked about Longwe's statements, suddenly he denies all the statements. Now, as an investigating officer, it is your duty, I suppose, I've never been a lead investigating officer, obviously, but if you take over a docket, it is your responsibility to go back to the witnesses that are already in the docket just to make sure that you have all your ducks in a row. Gininda says he did approach Longwe with regards to his statements, but he says that he didn't confirm any of the statements that Longwe had deposed. Now, the funny thing about this little version that Gininda is putting to us, that he didn't confirm the statement, is that Longwe was part of the state witnesses. He is witness number 3 on the state witness list. So what was he going to testify on if he didn't verify any of the statements that they have? Now, Mnisi touches on the ID parade that was done with Zamambata, and he says that Longwe Twala was one of the first witnesses to actually identify Uzamambata as one of the suspects that entered the Khumalo household, as well as Makhumalo, which now proves the fact that they had identified a person that is dark in complexion. And the fact that two people that were in the house were able to identify the same person should tell you something about the witnesses in the house. AC wants to touch on the issue that both Makhumalo and Longwe refer to the first suspect as being dark and with dreads, and that is shown by them pointing out a person that is dark and is short and has short dreads. But Gininda says, oh no, Longwe didn't even confirm his statement. He was denying some of his statement. There was a lot of contradictions. And he even goes as far as saying the NPA even requested to meet Longwe at the DPP offices. And he mentions a doctor that was present. And when the judge asks him about which doctor were you referring to, then suddenly Gininda gets confused and he says that he was referring to Dr. Sibanda, who is before the court. I'm just wondering what doctor was there when Longwe was there, and why was a doctor there? Because I don't believe that it was Usmanda that Gininda was referring to. Nisi continues going into much detail about the identification of the intruders and how the different witnesses that were in the house have these different statements according to Gininda. And for me, that should indicate to you that these people are not being honest with you. Like the fact that their stories are not coming together as people that were all in the house when the incident happened says a lot. Nisi then fell sick on Wednesday afternoon and the court then adjourned just so that he could seek medical attention. Thursday, the 28th of November, we were back in court and Nisi was feeling much better and cross-examination continued, where he now touched on the communication between Kelly and accused number 3 that Gininda had referred to. Now, Gininda then points out that he was referring to links and not communication. And basically, he says that Stain did indicate that there were links through the photos that were found on both Kelly and accused number 3's phone. Now, the thing about these links is that there's no source. So you cannot keep on saying that there's a link with pictures when you don't have the source of where the pictures came from. If you were able to tell us that on this date, Kelly Khumalo sent this picture to accused number 3, that's definitely now a link. But the fact that we both have photos, but you can't tell us where the photos came from, says to me that's not a link. That's not something that could make you suspicious because you don't know what the source of the photos is. And also, you didn't bother to ask both these people or 3 of these people, being Longwe, Kelly, and accused number 3, how they got the photos on their phone. Now, another interesting thing that Mnisi touched on Thursday is the issue of the jacket that the suspect that entered the house was allegedly wearing. And he basically touches on the color and also some of the descriptions that were given by some of the witnesses that were in the house. And one of the statements he read says that the collar of the jacket that the suspect was wearing had a woolen collar. Now, if you look at the picture of accused number 3 and his jacket on the day of the incident, that jacket doesn't have wool on the collar, child. It doesn't have wool. So my question is, how are they still convinced that it was accused number 3 that entered the Khumalo household that day? Now, same with the issue of the dreadlocks and going back to the witnesses in the house and trying to get a better description of the dreadlocks. Nisi then asked Gininda if he ever made attempts to go back to the people in the house and try to get more information about the jacket, because all of them just say khaki jackets. None of them gives a detailed explanation as to what the jacket looked like. So Nisi just asked, there could be a lot of khaki jackets in the world, in the country. So did you go back to find out if it had a zip, if it had buttons, if it had a hat, did you go back to find out any of that information from the witnesses? And Gininda says, no, he did not. Nisi then refers Gininda to the statement of Umtogo, who basically talks about the jacket and some on one of his statements. And Nisi asks if he went back to Umtogo to actually ask him more details about the jacket. And Gininda says with Umtogo as well, he did not go back to him to find out more information. And he says that the only time he went to Umtogo was with regards to the ID parade. Now, he also says this about the witnesses in the house. He says, he found consistency when it came to the fact that they were intruders, there was a gun involved, and the request for money and cell phones. However, the other descriptions were flimsy. Imagine the lead investigating officer telling you that the main witnesses or the eyewitnesses' statements are flimsy or are contradictory. What does that then say about this whole case? Now, the highlight of the week for me was when Mnisi went into this aspect of the FFC number that was provided by Mjiako. Now, Mnisi says, you know what? I've noticed that you tend to be referring a lot to the confessions of accused number 2, being Exhibit HH and Exhibit JJ. And it dawned on me that since you're referring so much to this exhibit, there might be something that I can find on these 2 exhibits that could be helpful to me. And when I went back and went into these 2 exhibits, there's a number. And this number does not really sit well with me because I've been a prosecutor, I've sat in many cases, and I've handled a lot of confessions and what have you, but I've never come across this number before. So it made me curious, and my prosecutorial instincts kicked in. And I was like, okay, it's getting interesting. And he says, I checked this number, and I went back to the record where Magistrate Cronier read out this number being 04415/2020 as the FFC number that Mjiako provided to her when Danzi gave his confession. And he says that the interesting thing about this particular number is that it's written on the side there. It's almost as if they wanted someone to pick up on that number kind of thing. So Mnisi says he's had a look at the number, but he was wondering if he could get assistance from the state and the investigating team to actually look up this number and provide more information with regards to this number. Now, guys, this is a slam dunk for the defense because as far back as last year already, we were told that this number does not belong to Mjiako. And the source of this information was Unjabulo on the Ghost Nation. Jabulo says, guys, Magistrate Cronier lied. That number does not belong to Mjiako. That was as far back as last year already. But obviously, we've just been waiting for things to play out in court. Now, when Mnisi says this number needs to be looked up, a lot of people have already been looking up on the internet. I will refer to Patricia as well. And so it had dawned on us, yes, it's not in court yet, but it has dawned on us that this particular FFC number didn't belong to Mjiako at the time, and it instead belonged to a Miss or Mrs. Skoltz. I'll try attach a picture over here. And Mjiako was only appointed in 2021. I'll also attach something over here that has information on Mjiako. So if Mjiako used the wrong FFC when representing Danzi in front of Magistrate Cronier, what does it say about his representation in the confession? As Mnisi is asking Gininda this question about the FFC number, Baloyi then stands up and objects and says that this witness cannot answer that question because firstly, an FFC number and a registration number is different because as Mnisi was pointing out this question, he says that he looked into the letter that was brought before the court that says this is a letter from Mjiako attorneys to say that they're no longer representing Undanzi because of non-payments or something to that effect. But the registration number there, they don't include the FFC number. So Mnisi was just curious as to why the FFC number is not there and all of that information. So Baloyi says it's not fair to ask the witness that question. And Mnisi then says, you are ahead of me. I was still going to get to where I'm going with this point with the FFC number. Mnisi then requests that they need someone to actually marry the connection between this particular number that was given to Magistrate Krenia and Mjiako's firm to confirm that that number really did belong to Mjiako at the time. Now, my thoughts on this are that Mnisi already knows the answer to this, but he's just wanting the state to come and bring it forward. Now, since the state indicated that they will give assistance in order for this number to be confirmed, Mnisi then continues with his cross-examination.
I apologize for the change in quality, guys. I have had to change cameras because of space. Anyway, Mnisi continues with his cross-examination, and he basically touches on the statement of Steenkamp, who is the lady who compiled the identikit. Now, the issue that Gininda had with this statement is that Mnisi kept referring to it where there is sort of a corroboration between all of the witnesses in the house and the description that they gave of accused number one. Steenkamp in her statement clearly says that all of the witnesses say that the first intruder was dark, short dreads, khaki jackets, and so forth. But now Gininda says that, no, but it's a different story because all the witnesses in the house in their own statement don't say the same thing. So what is Gininda trying to say about the identikit? Because this lady used the description that these people gave her, which is what she's written in her statement, to compile an identikit that was put out to the public for the public to have a lookout for these certain individuals. And now you're trying to say that this identikit is wrong or they misled the person that was doing the identikit. Gininda, honestly, when Mnisi asked Gininda if he agrees that a memory of a person is fresher when the incident just happened as opposed to a year later, 3 years later, 5 years later. And Gininda's response just off ramps, and he talks about how people in the house could see different things. That's not what the question was. The question is, day after the incident, everything is still fresh in your head compared to a year after and 2 years later and 5 years later and 10 years later even in this case. Now, when Mnisi points out that Kelly Khumalo herself says that the intruder was dark in complexion and she mentions a revolver as well, Gininda says that no, but Kelly didn't write that in her statement, and also she didn't talk about a revolver in her statement. And my thing is, the revolver is irrelevant when it comes to Steenkamp because Steenkamp is not there to draw the gun. She's there to draw the people that entered the house. So the information that is relevant for Steenkamp is the information with regards to the appearance of the suspects. Now, Gininda says the only thing that's consistent between Steenkamp's statement as well as Kelly's statement is the fact that they were intruders, but some of the other information is not consistent. Now, Mnisi says it's very interesting that you say that. You talk about consistency and inconsistency, particularly when it comes to the description, because Kelly says this person was dark brown. Who else in the house doesn't describe this person as dark brown? And then he says, no, I'm going to have to go look back in the dockets and have a look. And Mnisi then says, now I'll request you to actually do that and we'll get back to that. And then he says, who else in the house doesn't talk about the intruder having dreadlocks? And he says, no, everyone in the house talks about the intruder having dreadlocks, which is exactly Mnisi's point. Everybody talks about dreadlocks, everybody talks about him being short, and also everybody talks about him being dark. But conveniently, you're leaving out the dark part. You even go as far as saying, no, only 3 people said he was dark. The fact that 3 people out of 5 say that he was dark should say a lot. As the cross-examination continues, we touch on the issue of the gun, whereby Gininda says that Kelly and all the other people in the house don't have licenses, and therefore their description of the gun couldn't be accurate, as to what they saw, because also Mangena confirms that there was a 9mm that was involved in the killing of Senzo Meyiwa. Now, the crazy thing about this is that Mnisi then says, this thing of you saying that you need a license in order for you to identify a gun is crazy business, because first of all, Longwe, in his explanation, in his statement, says that this person carried a 38 special. That person is specific. That person is specific about the name of the gun. Kelly says she saw an old revolver. She's specific about what she saw. When it comes to Tumelo, he says he saw a gun with the wheel. Tell me what license you need to say this is a gun with a wheel, to give that description. What license do you need? So Mnisi makes an example of meeting a child on the street and showing them a picture of the president. Now, because that child watches TV, does it mean that that child needs a license to be able to know that this is the president of the country? So the judge says, no, that example is not the same thing. It's not the same thing. And then the judge goes on to talk about ISPAM and how he would talk about a gun. He says that when he talks about a gun, regardless of what type of gun it is, it will always be ISPAM. A gun. It will always be a gun, whether it's an AK-47, whether it's a revolver. When I say I saw a gun, I'll just say I saw a gun. Now, the difference between what the judge is saying and what Olongwe said is that they were specific. They didn't just say I saw a gun. They say I saw this specific gun, right? And Gininda also goes as far as saying you, with the example that Mnisi used is not the same, because you don't need a license to watch TV. And I'm just like, and you need a license to identify a gun. So if I am on the street and I see a VW Polo, I need what, to be a mechanic in order to say that's a VW Polo. Or I need to be some sort of engineer to say that's a VW Polo. Gininda, come on. People know things. People research things, especially if you have an interest in those particular things. People research. You can research all this information, and you don't need to have a license, a firearm license, in order for you to identify a gun. That's just my opinion. Those were the proceedings for Thursday. On Friday, Mnisi continues his cross-examination, and one of the questions that Gininda found difficulty in answering is the question with regards to the NPA and sharing the same narrative when it comes to Kelly Khumalo being the mastermind in this case. He questions Gininda about 4 times and still couldn't get a response from him whether the NPA shared the same narrative that Kelly Khumalo was the mastermind in this case. Now, what Gininda then goes and does is throw the NPA right under the bus, because he says, as early as before the case even started, as early as 2020, I already had the view that Kelly Khumalo was involved in this incident, and I did give this information to the NPA. However, when the NPA came to court, they were still pushing the agenda of a robbery gone wrong. So my question is Gininda really the one that's doing all the cooking on his own, or is the NPA part of it at this point? Because why did they not arrest Kelly Khumalo as well, if they believe that she's the mastermind? And why did they come to court and say that the indictment is that it's a robbery gone wrong, when they knew very well that the investigating officer is still saying that there was a hit? Now, the issue of this question with the NPA having a certain narrative when it came to Kelly Khumalo went so deep that the judge also just ended up saying, you know what, Mnisi, ask whatever you want. And I was just like, why is he being like that? Why is he saying Mnisi must ask whatever he wants? He needs to make a ruling whether that question is allowed or not, and he just is not bothered. Now, Mnisi touches on the issue of the letter or the statement that was provided by Gininda to the magistrate when applying for the J50 warrants of arrest. And Mnisi picks up that some of the information with regards to the suspect that Gininda was referring to was missing in the statement, where he speaks about the dreadlocks, and he says that he wants to apply for a section 205. This person was arrested for a previous case, and there are photos that were found on his phone that resemble the description of the witnesses that were in the house. And he mentions the issue of the dreadlocks, and he also talks about a gold tooth. Now, when Mnisi questions about this, he asks Gininda why is it that he felt it was necessary for him to leave out the issue of the suspect actually being dark in complexion. And Gininda basically says that it was a summary, so he wasn't writing all the information that was available. He was just summarizing why he needed that warrant from the magistrate. Now, looking at the statement that Gininda wrote and saying that the accused was arrested in 2015 and his cell phone was seized, and they found some photos, and the photos depict dreadlocks, a gold tooth, and it's consistent with what the witnesses in the house saw. Then Mnisi requests Gininda to point to the photos that he was referring to when he said that photos depict what the witnesses in the house said, and actually tell the court which photos he was referring to in this statement when he said they depict dreadlocks, a gold tooth, and all the information that was in the statement. Now, when Mnisi requests Gininda to do this, for some reason, Baloyi objects and says that that's not the procedure as to how a Section 205 should be handled. And I guess he misunderstood the question from Mnisi, because Mnisi wasn't talking about the application. He doesn't deny that the process of the application was done right or whatever. What he's focusing on is what he's referring to in his statement when it comes to the pictures, and that's what he wants to see. So Baloyi was totally lost at this point. Now Mnisi repeats the question and says, Gininda, take us to the photo in Exhibit S that depicts the dreadlocks, the big eyes, and a gold tooth. And Gininda says, well, firstly, the dreadlocks are already there, and also when it comes to the pictures, I didn't just look at one picture, I went to a variety of pictures. Now, if you're describing a picture that depicts what the witnesses in the house were describing, you should only be looking at pictures from the 26th of October in that person's phone, which depict what the people saw. But now you're telling us about a variety of photos. What other photos are you talking about, Gininda? What other photos? And also there's a photo which is photo 15, which Gininda keeps saying is accused number 3, and he says that it's him and it has a gold tooth. Now this picture is already been said to not be accused number 3, right? It's already said that that is not accused number 3 in the photo, and Gininda then says, yeah, maybe because of the angle. Now you're trying to dispute that that person is not him in the photo, and you're talking about angles. It's either him or it's not him, Gininda. Make up your mind. So Mnisi then concluded his cross-examination for the day, and he just basically says that he is a bit tired, and the process of Gininda going through all the photos would take some time, so they will commence on Monday with that exercise. So those were the proceedings for the week. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope that you enjoyed your weekend, and I will see you in my next video. Bye bye.